Rob?
Okay.
Hey, Rob? We okay? Thank you.
Are we good?
Good.
I'm going to call this meeting to order. This is a public session of the Council Rock Board of School Directors. This meeting is being recorded by the Council Rock School District and may be recorded by members of the audience. Please stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Brooks,
Here.
Dr. Foster,
Here.
Mr. Grubb,
Present.
Mrs. McKessie,
Here.
Mrs. Sexton,
Present.
Mrs. Thomas,
Here.
Mr. Block,
Here.
Mr. Abramson,
Here.
and Mark Bialik.
Mr. Bialik is away on business. Okay, we're going to open with public comment. Public comment is an opportunity for members of the public to address the board. We ask that you limit your comments to no longer than 3 minutes. Please consider the fact that there may be young children in the audience or watching the broadcast on CRTV. It is our goal to maintain a respectful environment so that members of our community have an equal opportunity to address the board without interruption. While the board welcomes your ideas and will consider them in deliberating an issue, we may not respond to your comments or questions. The first person I have signed up is Allison Raptime, something, please? Sorry. That's okay. Please state your name correctly and your town as you approach the mic. Thank you.
I'm Allison Rapine from Newtown Borough, and I am the PTA president at Newtown Middle School. First, I want to start by thanking all of the committees for the long hours that you put in coming up with the proposals, and the board for all of your hard work over the past few months. I can't imagine to begin the position you find yourselves in, but I would like to commend you all for being open to explore any and all ideas that benefit the district as a whole, regardless of your personal preferences. Over the past few weeks, there has been much debate as to how to address trailers and building capacities at the elementary level, but little has been mentioned about the middle school needs. Both Richborough Middle School and Newtown Middle School have trailers that must come offline for the safety of our students and staff. There are some on the board that have stated that they would like to see Holland completed before Newtown because of the undeniable savings that will transpire with the consolidation and closure of Richborough Middle. I respect and appreciate trying to save money, but I would say this. Holland Middle is a newer, more structurally sound building with no trailers and has room to accommodate some of the students from Richboro now, so you can take the 3 trailers offline at Richboro Middle School for the 2015-16 school year. Getting trailers offline at Newtown Middle School will be much harder to facilitate. There are structural and space issues that cannot be ignored. During the renovation process at Goodnow Elementary, classrooms were shuffled multiple times in 1 year as the new wing was built. Subsequent hallways were renovated and classrooms moved into their permanent new homes. The current space configuration of Newtown Middle does not allow for this scenario to replicate itself in our building. I cannot see how a renovation of Newtown Middle is possible while students are in attendance. There's not another North Middle School to send students to, and sending them to Richboro or Holland and then transferring them back to Council Rock North just wouldn't make sense. Newtown Middle School is an old building and in dire need of work. Who knows what surprises you will find when you start tearing down cinder block walls and tile ceilings. If you haven't taken a walk through Newtown Middle School lately, I encourage you to tour our Team Phoenix wing. At back to school night, I was shocked to discover a fracture down the middle of the floor that runs through multiple classrooms. It is deep enough and wide enough that pencils and crayons have found a new home in it. This is a significant safety hazard in the floor, not just a cosmetic eyesore. Step outside and you will see 5 trailers that are used for languages and health, but more importantly, they are homerooms, where our 8th grade students take their PSSA testing several times a day over several weeks. There is no room to currently bring these students inside and get trailers offline. How are you going to take classrooms offline to renovate? Closing off a hallway would impact 10 or more classrooms at one time. Where will those additional displaced kids go? The only logical answer is to build new. First priority must be, before closing schools, must be giving all of our kids a safe learning environment and getting trailers offline at every school. Consolidating, this is not a quick or easy fix at the middle school level, I understand, it will take time. Consolidating Holland and Richboro Middle Schools as a long-term plan makes sense, but I cannot rationalize closing Richboro Middle first when Newtown Middle will still have kids in trailers. Pushing off the Newtown project to a start date of 4+ years will continue to perpetuate the use of trailers for years to come. By transitioning some kids to Holland Middle now, while we build a new Newtown Middle School, the district can address trailers at both schools without having to spend a substantial amount of money to complete both projects at the same time. The transition to middle school is not always an easy one for students. It is a critical time for development not only academically, but socially and emotionally as well. Students go through many changes as they prepare for high school. These are formative years where students try to figure out who they are and where they fit in with their new peers. For many, this is the first time they will navigate crowded halls, to get to class before the bell rings, use lockers, have 5 different teachers with 5 different class expectations. This process can be a bit overwhelming, but by the time they leave under the guidance of our amazing principals, teachers, and staff, the students at Newtown Middle School mature and blossom into independent learners and thinkers, ready to make their mark on high school and beyond. I only have 1 more year left at Newtown Middle School, and my own children will not be here to benefit from the finished project. But as PTA president, I feel a responsibility not only to the current students, but also the future students of Newtown Middle School. Their time here is short. We need to provide them with the safest, most stable, non-disruptive learning environment possible so they can go on to become successful, well-adjusted, well-rounded, productive members of our community. Please don't renovate, build new. The middle school projects, whatever they may be, will take time. I urge you on November 6th to vote to do something to address the issues at our middle school level. I appreciate the board's time and thank you. Please take this into consideration as you make your decisions.
Next, I have Erin McCarthy.
Just to save time, is that after her?
After her is Kathleen Cardinal, so if you want to come and wait, that'd be great.
Okay. Hi, good evening. Erin McCarthy, Wrightstown Elementary School. I have not had an opportunity to be here in person, but I have watched all the televised meetings, and I've seen all the arguing, and I feel that at times the focus has varied from the main point and kind of got mired down into the little detail points. So there's a couple main points that I just wanted to touch upon tonight. The first is the idea of making the 5th and 6th grade classes a segregated center at Newtown. First of all, in doing so, I think that would really present a logistical nightmare for quite a few parents. Speaking for myself, I would have 3 children at 3 different schools with approximately the same pickup time. Secondly, in doing this, I think it really could lead to a very unsatisfying elementary experience for our 5th and 6th graders, being not only separated from their mother school, but then segregated within a different school and not being able to mix with these children, many of whom they know from other sports, etc. So I really would like to know how Wrightstown would go about handling school spirit events, field days, activities, assemblies, that kind of thing. My second point is the point of the Council Rock North section school overcrowding. I know that there's been several studies that have stated an ideal efficient capacity is 700. And if Wrightstown were to be closed, 2 out of the 3 schools in that northern end would be over that, with Newtown at 896, Goodnoe at 848, and Soul Finestone at 704. Wrightstown is the only Blue Ribbon school in the district, and I have to believe that part of that is due to the fact that it is so small. So I question with loading these schools over the ideal number of 700, I wonder what is that going to do to the educational integrity over the long term. In addition, it's hardly fair that all the schools in the northern end would be over that 700 number, yet all the schools in the southern end would remain with student numbers between 300 and 650. Wrightstown has not been renovated since 1964. The residents have been paying taxes, which has funded many other school enlargements and renovations. There's been enlargements that everybody admittedly will admit that were done, and now there's vacancies in spaces where they weren't anticipated. The only area for proposed growth in the school district is the northwest corner, so maybe enlarging Wrightstown to accommodate that growth without overburdening these other schools in the northern section is the idea that we need to look at a little bit more. And in turn, speaking of school closures, I know the Capital Planning Committee had identified Wrightstown as well as Rolling Hills initially. It seems like Rolling Hills kind of fell off the radar and Wrightstown was zeroed right in on. And I wonder why this is, because there are 5 schools in the Southern District within the same geographical area. So if you were to close Rolling Hills, which is also a small school, and divide those children among those other 5 schools, those schools would still be below the 700 model, and you'd accommodate some growth in the northern section. You would still have cost savings, but it would be much less disruptive to everybody. With closing Wrightstown, there's a lot of people that are affected. There's going to be some kids from Soul Finestone that are going to need to go to Newtown, some kids from Newtown that are going to need to go to Goodnoe, and all the students at Wrightstown are going to be divvied up between schools. So there's a lot of disruption, and I don't really know if the cost savings are going to be that much more. So those are the points I needed to make tonight. Thank you for your time.
Kathleen Cardinal, and thought I had another sheet. Go ahead.
I appreciate this opportunity. I don't have a lengthy address. I just have a perspective as a parent who's had 3 sons attend Wrightstown Elementary School, and they've all had wonderful experiences, and I thought that I just wanted to share a bit of my experience as a parent there and my son's experience. They all signed a petition today, so I was excited that they were interested in doing so. We felt that it was a wonderful elementary ed environment. It's a complement to the larger elementary schools that comprise Council Rock. It's an iconic building in historic Wrightstown, and I think these are perhaps not similar points that have been made so far, but what I wanted to share. After returning this August, we were living in suburban London for the past 2 years and absorbed a fair share of respect for preserving heritage of the place. I think Wrightstown is that to the school district. Earlier in the week, I called at about 5 in the afternoon to see if anybody was available at Wrightstown to answer a few questions, realizing that it was late in the day. Mrs. Pierce answered the phone, was happy to talk to me, remembered all 3 of my sons, and my eldest just graduated from College of Charleston, is working in Conshohocken. My middle son is at Boston College, majoring in physics and is a sophomore, and my eldest is a high school senior at North. So I think that says a lot for the school. Thank you.
Thank you. I have another Heather Oberham. And then if anybody else would like to speak after Heather, if you wouldn't mind lining up along the wall, that would be great. Thank you.
Hi, Heather Oberhau, Wrightstown. This is the first time I've come to any board meeting in 16 years, so you have a really engaged public right now. And when the process first started, I heard the words fair and parity and equal, and they were all used as a way to advocate for closing a smaller school. If we close Wrightstown, we essentially create 3 super schools in the northern end of the district. Our spread from smallest to largest school increases by 134 students for a total of a difference of 582 students from our smallest to largest school. We create a school district where the southern end has 6 elementary schools, 4 of them under 500 students, 2 in the mixed 600, and the northern Sendon area will have schools that go with student populations of 896, 848, and 704 students. And even if you change those numbers and try to even them out, the average is 812 students per school. 3 schools, 812 students. Parity, fair, equal. We're not accomplishing any of those goals that you set out when you put Wrightstown on the plate to be closed. If we turn towards taking off modulars, which I think we all agree is a really admirable goal, again, we create a situation where one school is forced to split their student population. Again, I ask, is that fair? I'm tired of Wrightstown being the redheaded stepchild of the district. We're continually overlooked and pushed off for renovations as if our student population and our taxpayers are somehow less important because we only have 325 students in the school. We were due for renovations before Goodnow. Rolling Hills and Wrightstown were due next, and we pushed us off for Goodnow Elementary, and you had me on that. Absolutely, get those kids out of the trailers. But what has happened is we've created a situation where we're continually pushed off, and then our school is now suddenly it needs too many repairs. We can't fix it now. We act as if it's no big deal to uproot our students, teachers, and community to backfill available capacity. We're not a backfill. We're a school, a really vibrant, functioning school in that area. If we follow Mr. Klein's plan, which honestly I think is the best that we could possibly hope for at this point, we're displacing 100 kids and 2 grades to essentially save 4 full-size classrooms for small group instruction, which is the thing that really irritates a lot of board members, right? Right-sizing our rooms. And I'm going to blow your mind because I'm up in my game. We need an addition on Wrightstown. Not only do I want it to stay open, now I want it bigger. And I don't want to hear about the septic. We're closing 4 modulars. If we decommission those modulars and take that same amount of space and add it onto Wrightstown, we're not adding square footage or students to the current load of that septic system. South Feinstein is on septic, and we just added an administration addition to that. You know, I hear a lot of talk about doing right by the taxpayers. I want you to do right by me. I spent 16 years. We've done massive builds and renovations. We're looking at 2 additional ones. My kids aren't going to see any of those except maybe the middle school. What about our school? Why are we always pushed off? I want you to do right by me, too. Thank you so much for your time.
John Roche, ironically from Wrightstown Township. My issue has to do with inaction. I've been following this board for many, many years, and the inaction is what's causing this crisis now. For those of you who weren't part of the board back when the Hayes Large study happened, which already was showing the projections of decline in enrollment, action should have been taken by that board, but it was not. Redistricting should have been done by that board, but was not. School closing should have been talked about by that board, but were not. Taxpayers have been paying for more schools than necessary for years. We have fewer students now at 11,122 than we did in 1997, when there were 11,563 students. The board in 1997 was concerned that they had to build new schools, including Council Rock South and Maureen Welch, because the population was going to keep skyrocketing. And by this time, we would have 13,500 students. We have fewer students than we did before we built Maureen Welch or Council Rock South. If they could fit then, why can't they fit now? I, as a taxpayer, do not see why the non-parent taxpayers are expected to continue paying for more schools than are really necessary. And this board needs to take that action. There have been multiple studies, the Pell study, the Hayes Large study, now the Growth Committee study, and they're all saying the same thing. Council Rock has too many schools. It is time to finally say, this is the time where Council Rock makes a decision on what's the correct number of schools, and you do it. I don't claim to be an expert about which school should close. All I know is we don't need 10 elementaries. And I am urging you to do your duty to the tax-paying population here to make sure that our money goes toward educating children and not keeping buildings open simply because we have buildings. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Linda Ralston, and I'm a parent of 2 Rolling Hills students, as well as a member of the Home and School Board. I'm also a new member to this community. I just moved here in April. One of our goals when searching for a home was to get into the Council Rock School District. And we heard about this great, wonderful community called Village Shires, and that's where we ended up. Upon hearing of some of the discussions during the meetings, I understand that some redistricting may be possible. I don't even know what's going to happen in Rolling Hills. But I did hear that there might be redistricting of Rolling Hills students, and that would include separating the single homes of Village Shire students to Hillcrest. And that really, I don't feel that makes sense, because one of the reasons I love my Village Shires is because we are a neighborhood and we are a community, which I think is so important when raising a family. And to separate just certain houses in one neighborhood and send those kids to a different school, I think could be devastating. I ask that if you are redistricting students from a school, that you carefully look at your neighborhoods and group them together and not divide a line among them and send one to one school and one to the other. Thank you.
Nancy Carroll, Newtown Borough, up here without any notes. One thing I have to speak to from my heart is that when this school, this room right here, was a first grade classroom, and that room was a first grade classroom, and the kindergarten kids were in the back. This was a wonderful building. You could not come in here without knowing that you were in a wonderful place, that the K and 1 and 2, or K and 1, had a chance to be together without the older children and to be integrated together as a first grade class, as a kindergarten class. They were part of Goodnow. We used to call it Chancellor Goodnow. When you make this move, you could call it Wrightstown, Newtown, if that's what you're going to do. And we were given by the district at the time a bus, not on standby, but a bus when needed during the day. If, for instance, you were going to do kindergarten circus and they needed an auditorium, because this did not have an auditorium when it was a K-1. And I think that the children got to know each other as a grade. Everyone loved working in this building, whether you were a secretary or a janitor. Everybody knew all the little kids by their name because it was a lot smaller than the big Goodnow school that they were going to go to. And it also gave the district the advantage that we had an assistant principal here. And that assistant principal, some of them went on to be principals. Dan Greenland was one of them. And it gave a really good mentoring place. And at a time when, unfortunately, the district is going to lose an incredible amount of leadership, I am mourning over that between Mark Klein, Joy, and Jack Pinero. Having a K-1 at Wrightstown would give you the opportunity to promote somebody within maybe the Joy spot and have an assistant principal for a little bit lower salary at Wrightstown if it's a K1 and 2. And I think that is more ideal than having, for me, I would not want my 5th or 6th grader, just for me, to go up to a big school, even if they sat with all their friends from Wrightstown. It's going to be a harder transition than a whole 1st grade that have known each other for a year or 2 up to the big school as a group. Thank you very much.
Good evening. Pardon my attire. I had to raise here from a workout tonight, so I'm sorry about that. I'm Sue Montgomery. I live right around the corner. My son is a 3rd grader in Rolling Hills, and my family has recently relocated here from Massachusetts. And when I bought my home, I thought that we were going to be going to Richboro Elementary School. And I came over here, much to my surprise. Guess what? We're redistricted to Rolling Hills. I remember driving over there and walking in there in the middle of summer and saying, "Dear Lord, this is Bucks County? This is where my son's going to go to school." It looked like that school hadn't been painted or the lawn mowed in a really long time. So the teachers there are lovely. We've just lost our principal. My concern as a parent, right now, our neighborhood has the perimeter of our neighborhood goes to Rolling Hills. The rest go to Richboro. Presently, my son can't even play baseball in the baseball league with his friends. He has to go to play at Northampton. So now, with all the chaos and discussion about where they're going to go, not only am I concerned about him and his age having moved to the school district and get all new friends if they do indeed go to Newtown Middle School, he'd have to go to North High School. I can walk out my back gate and get on the track in Council Rock South in 30 seconds. And so I will see that where it makes sense for our piece of our neighborhood, similar to the woman from Village Shires, to get redistricted over to another school. My son and a few of his friends in our neighborhood would have to get uprooted as part of this plan. So I would ask that you would please consider that. I think our little piece of our road of our neighborhood has been moved around a few times. Please consider what that's doing to our children and then to our lifestyle, having to go to the district, and it's not even nearby in our neighborhood. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Jenny Schottmiller from Wrightstown. I wanted to say I've been thinking a lot this week about what happened at the last meeting and the option for Wrightstown to either be a K-4 and K-1 school. I really would like to urge the board to give us more time to be having these discussions about that. I've talked to people and I've heard people be very evenly divided on those two options, and both sides have a lot of really good reasons why they want one or the other, and I'm actually finding myself wanting one I didn't think I would. And I think that it's interesting to consider these options, but we need more time. 1 week, we just found out about, these were just presented. If this was voted on as soon as November 6th, I just really think that that is too soon. So I'd really like to ask that we have more time to think about that and have the conversations with the board and the community. On the, just logistically, I do believe both the K-1 and the K-4 work. We'd fit in either scenario. Looking at the numbers, both would take up exactly 9 classrooms, which is how many Wrightstown has. It's true that if you were a K-1, you would fit a few more students in that building in 9 classrooms because you're putting more kindergarten in there, and kindergarten classrooms have a capacity of 50, so you can fit more kids in there. But it doesn't have anything to do with the 90% or Schrader's methodology. It's just that when you concentrate grades more in a school, they break less often, and you can fit more kids in the same number of classrooms. How you use the school changes the capacity. So I think that's another reason why it needs to be looked at a little bit more in depth before a decision is made. Something that was mentioned last board meeting which interested me was this idea that, you know, some schools have, some classes are really small, some are really big. And does that mean something about, you know, does this disparity in class size have implications for students? And so I went and I looked at the average class size by school and by grade, and actually it's kind of all over the map. Most schools have some small and some large classes. And most of the sort of volatility is where schools have a lot of really small and really large happens in the south area. I think that's because there's more smaller schools down there. Wrightstown has the smallest kindergarten in the district, but that's the second time that's happened in 9 years. And we have the largest second grade. We just got 2 more kids this week. So I think what my question is that came up last week is maybe we could take modulars off without redistricting. And I had been saying and believing you have to redistrict this district. And so I wonder if you were to redistrict this district, does that even change? You have children in, you know, 14 average classroom. In average 5th grade in Rolling Hills is 20 kids. Average 6 for 5th grade in 6th grade is 32. So, you know, the people that live around Rolling Hills didn't happen to have as many 5th graders and 4th graders as they have 6th graders. They have a huge 6th grade. That happens at every school, so I just wonder if you redistrict, will that still happen? There's one thing I liked about the meeting last week was it seems ideas are coming out about what might be in your 5-year plan. And I have a couple of requests. One is, I know you can vote to take off modulars. And in 3 of the schools that have them in the elementary schools, pretty easy to do, it looks like. I would really ask that you wait on Wrightstown to let us have the conversation about what kind of structure our school is going to have so that we make a really good decision there for the students. Also, because if you decide to redistrict in the next 2 to 3 years and you make this change now, you will be potentially redistricting some Wrightstown and maybe even Newtown students 2 times in a couple of years. I don't think that, I've heard things from the board, they don't want to redistrict a kid twice. So I think wait on Wrightstown until we have these conversations. I know you can move Knock to north, which is great. I think you should really consider where that north-south boundary line is. It hasn't been discussed much. And where you put that boundary has implications for how much capacity is at north, what size you need for your middle schools, as well as possibly how you can redistrict, because a south school is going to be a south school, and you can't send kids from a north school to a south school if that's where the line is. I think you really need to have a specific conversation about that. You can evaluate, I really liked what Dr. Foster said last week about evaluating the programming at each elementary school. That makes so much sense. Dr. Dave Schrader said when he presented the report, we're not trying to reprogram, but if you do that, you change the capacity of the schools. That's important before you make some of these decisions. But I would ask that you make an effort to remove children from atypical spaces. Schrader had 2 objectives. One was removing the modulars. The other was taking children out of storage spaces and making them storage spaces because of how they're designed. They're not meant for students and staff. The last one is you can vote to build a new middle school and renovate Holland so you can close Richboro Middle School. I ask that you continue to look at efficiencies after November 6th to consider what other grade level structures might create further inefficiencies so that you can help you afford the cost of the middle school constructions and renovations. Thank you.
Good evening, Stephanie Barrier-Terrace from Wrightstown. I just wanted to make a couple of comments because, like Jenny, I've had the chance to talk to many of the other families at Wrightstown Elementary, and I want to echo, even though, so my daughter's going into, or next year she'll be 5th grade, a lot of the people that I know are of that grade, there are a lot of split opinions even amongst them for which of those 2 options, you know, one, 1st, 2nd, Newtown, Wrightstown combined, or moving Wrightstown Elementary to 5th, 6th, would make more sense. So I would also urge the board to give the community a chance to see what that looks like, to tell us what it looks like, because honestly, I think that we deserve the details. And when I say we deserve the details, I want to just point out 5th and 6th grade has a lot of programming associated with it, right? That's what makes the education so rich. So you've got band, you've got orchestra, you've got the choir, you've got the physical education piece, you've got kids with instructional support, you've got kids in humanities, math enrichment, and all of those things need to be worked out. Are they going to be in closets? What's the staffing support for them, et cetera? And so until we know what that looks like, you know, how can we form an opinion, yes, this makes good sense. On the other hand, I feel like Newtown Elementary parents also need to know what does it look like if their children are going to be doing 1, 2 at Wrightstown and then the remainder of the elementary years at Newtown. So I think it's only fair to your constituents, to those of us who are residents, to understand what that looks like, to hear from you what would that look like. You know, I would encourage you all to charge Mark Klein with developing more details around those two options and letting the community speak to them once we have some of that information. So I'm saying all good models, ideas on the table, but please flush out some of those details so that we can have a picture for where it's going. The only other point I wanted to make tonight is I think one of those important details is for kindergartners. So I had 2 kindergartners go through Wrightstown Elementary who both needed to go to after school for childcare purposes. And I had a heck of a time trying to figure out with the principal, how could I do all this? Well, at the end of the day, I got it done. But my daughters took bus half hour to school in the morning, an hour from Wrightstown Elementary to the after school facility, and then of course home at the end of the day. So it worked, but 2 hours a day on a bus for a kindergartner is not ideal. And the reason I bring that up is I think that you're going to find with the K-1 model, some kindergartners might have a lot of time on a bus. It's in particular those who need the full school day for childcare purposes. Thank you.
Hiya, Amy McIntyre, Newtown, PA, on behalf of Wrightstown. I would like to echo what Heather said about parity. We've heard about that from day one, coming to these meetings back in June. And to close Wrightstown increases the disparity between the smallest and the largest school in our district. Just doesn't seem like what I heard the board wanted to do. I really would like to hear some discussion on the nitty-gritty of our superintendent's presentation on the Wrightstown closure, if we're still going to be talking about that. You know, that 5 schools essentially become overcrowded once Goodnow receives students from the new build over at Newtown Swim Club. That Newtown Elementary School will be short 2 classrooms. That special education and small instruction rooms get gobbled up by displaced Wrightstown students. What do we do about all of this? I've heard every night when I come to these meetings how many students were down, how many classrooms we've added, how many schools we've added, how many students were enrolled at each school's very uncomfortable peak. The fact is, since 1999, Council Rock School District has not been able to educate all of its students inside of its schools. There have been children in learning in modulars since 1999. So while all of those other things may be true, it's almost an aside. Until we can figure out how to get all of the children inside of these schools while making sure that each school structure meets the standards of the district and that no child is in an atypical space meant for storage, I don't think we should be talking about closing a school. I also don't like when I have to hear that closing a school is hard, but
we have to do things that are hard. And I don't think it's about that, and it shouldn't really be about that. It should be closing a school when it's right. And if it's going to overburden 5 schools, it's not right. So I would like to take the emotional aspect out of this. These options of reconfiguring Wrightstown to remove the modulars are coming up very late in the game. I've been coming to every meeting since June. This is the first time I'm hearing of it. I'm fairly sure it's the first time the board heard of it last week. There will be significant consequences with any of those decisions. You can do a simple pros cons list in your mind, and there's significant pros and cons to either of those 2 options. To be voting on that on November 6th does not give the community the time, or you the time, to really consider all of the implications of one of those decisions. Something, you know, I've kind of been well, I was labeled a community organizer, so kind of thought that was funny. But so as a community organizer, I put a poll up on our Facebook page to just see how the community feels about those 2 options. I don't think it represents the results that we've got so far, which is about 70 people. I don't think it represents what the community feels on the issue. But I think our district could do something very similar for a very minimal cost. You could just put up a poll on your website. This is a simple thing to do, and you'd have a lot of, I'm not the only Facebook page out there. Rolling Hills has one. You'd be able to reach a lot of people, send it out to the PTOs, and get input, because not everybody can make these meetings, and unfortunately not everyone takes the time to email the board. So I just think I would like to see the district and the board get a little bit more creative in how you can reach the community if you truly do want their input, which I am beginning to question, since still the board meeting with the Wrightstown closure presentation has yet to be posted on YouTube. And the presentation has yet to be discussed ultimately by our Board of Education. I haven't heard any real discussion on, like I said, the nitty-gritty of that presentation. So those are some concerns of mine. And I thank you for your time, and I'm thrilled to see so many people here tonight. Holla.
Okay. Moving on. I was going to suggest we do since our only real topic tonight for board discussion is capital planning, I was going to move ahead with our one motion so we can get the minutes done, and then we can open it up for capital planning just for consistency. So, Mrs. Brooks, you want to make the motion?
I move to approve the October 4th, 2014 meeting minutes of the Board of School Directors as contained in the attachment to this agenda.
I apologize. I believe that's supposed to be October 9th.
Oh, yeah. Nice. Sorry.
You're correct. Thank you.
I can read the line I have. It said October 9th.
I'll second that.
Any comments? Okay, hearing no objections, I'm asking the Secretary to record the motion as passing by unanimous consent. And I'd like to open the board for, I'd like to open the floor for board comment around capital planning. Mr. Grout.
I prepared something. I'm actually going to, these were my thoughts. I put these together for October 9th. I was defeated by sound, or lack thereof. I made copies. These were, some of these are a little dated, but these were notions of what I wanted to consider. What I'd like to do when I'm distributing is really intended just to help us to differentiate some of the things that we've been talking about. I think that as a board, we've gotten a little bit of confusion between goals and goals and tools. And we keep talking about some of the tools and trying to dictate what some of the tools are, when I think as a board, we need to focus on what some of the goals are. So let me just walk through, and these are mine alone. This is not, there's a little disclosure on this. This is a straw man. This is just my thoughts working alone. And it's not an approved board document, so don't anybody walk away saying the board gave out this document. I gave out this document. All right? The first thing, and I'm going to walk through it And for those who think I'm taking a long time, I wasn't here last week. I get to make up some time. The first thing I hope we would all agree that one of the goals will be to maintain the safety and viability of the schools we have for the students and staff. That means routine maintenance included. Driveways, roofs, floors, infrastructure, they have to continue. Many years ago, there was some aspect of deferred maintenance, and I don't believe this board, I hope, will not accept deferred maintenance of our facilities. The second thing is, the objective is really to reduce the expenditures where possible without sacrificing educational achievement. I hope we come to agreement on some of these things. For me, the third priority was to optimize the use of facilities. This is the objective. The tools to do that include eliminating trailers. Mr. Klein spoke to that last week. I have a note here that says redistrict at the administration's discretion. You heard that again last week at some level when Mr. Klein spoke to moving those programs in our schools where the children are not tied to schools by geography. That the redistricting primarily would be around programs that are not geographically tied. This would be a program typically for a special education student where we aggregate the special education students from all the schools in the district with a similar existing condition and bring them together for the economies of scale and for the benefit of them in a well-developed program. So, redistricting. At the elementary levels, I believe that we should do some aspect, and Mr. Klein's presentation last week does maintain preservation of a school, of a neighborhood orientation of schools, and I was pleased with that, and I would like to continue moving forward. Preserving the feeder schools, someone spoke to this. I don't want to have children go to one elementary school with one group, a different middle school with different kids, and a different high school. I think we saw the problems with that when we had Richboro Middle, so that's a guidance. Item C under that 3C is consider school pairing. Now, I had made a recommendation back in March about complete school pairing, K through 6 in 2 school pairs. It didn't garner collection of enough support. I'm fine. Jenny Schottmiller has come forward with a proposal around K to 4 schools and 5 and 6. And I really think that that still has some merit and should be considered and explored. And I don't think we've given the charge to the administration to do that. The reason I say this is, it's great to take the trailers offline. Once we do that, we're going to have the schools pretty much filled to capacity. Any small changes that happen, I don't know that we'll have space in the schools to accommodate them. By doing the K to 5, if it turns up the numbers that Jenny has spoken to of 10, if it turns up the numbers 7 less classrooms that we need, it's 7 less teachers we need, and it's 7 spaces we can use as, I don't think anybody, when you buy clothing, if your weight changes a little bit, you don't want to buy clothing just to the top end of, that's tight because you'll not fit it if you gain a little bit of weight. I want to be careful about that. You also don't want to buy it oversized. For me, the next aspect was eliminating and reducing the use of law school admission counsel. I heard Mr. Klein speak to some other alternatives that may benefit from the Achieve program. Let me back up. I admit we can't move the alternative school right now. I think that, for me, I haven't figured out a solution for that. One thing I do agree with, it comes up last week, I want to move forward with moving the NOC. I think it makes sense. I want to do that. The goal here, let's keep goals and tools. I want to reduce, the goal is eliminating law school admission counsel or reducing. The tools are moving the NOC. Mr. Klein has suggested moving it permanently to north. I'm okay with that. Distributing the IT staff doesn't have to move with it. We're no longer at the day and age when people have to stay with the computers by and large. There was discussion about moving Achieve. The time I wrote this was talking about moving Achieve here. I don't know that that's dead, but I think that the opportunity to explore moving Achieve in with some of the other educational programs, I mean, Mr. Klein has talked about some partnering with the community college. Explore it, but we have to be prepared to move Achieve, if not, next year, the year after, by getting them out of law school admissions council building. Downstairs in this building, by the way, so the movement of special services, Lambert being Dr. Lambert et al., is really conditioned upon, do we need the space for Achieve? We don't need them, let's say here. For me, eliminating the training space in the basement of Chancellor Street is going to be important. That may wind up being swing space for the NOC staff. We have dedicated training space downstairs for staff that we use. We have a number of schools. If we need to train staff, we can put them in a building, in a classroom, to train them in a classroom not having dedicated space. Sorry if this sounds long. For me, middle schools, Newtown, finalize the pros and cons of the rebuild. You know, I listed here as rebuild or replace. I watch Love It or List It at home. I'm pretty much on board with, at this point, I'd probably be a listed person. I probably want to move. But I still want to see the pros and cons, you know, finalized and move forward. But the board decision on that needs to come of rebuild or replace within the next 2 months. I think we agree we move forward, but we need to get, maybe sooner, I'm maybe the only one, but 2 months. Holland Middle School, we begin the concept work now. Have to. Even if we begin the concept work now, it's naturally going to be 18 months behind the other building, just because it's going to take, we don't have the preliminary engineering plans. We have preliminary engineering plans for the other one. When those two are done, the goal here, by the way, on the middle school is eliminating Richboro Middle School. That's the goal. These are tools we're talking about now. Closing Richboro when it's finalized, when the finalization of the reservation of the other two. Repurpose Newtown Middle School. Here in the last two, on the first side, are the board needs to create direction for the administration establishing minimum classroom efficiencies. What we need to do is we need to, and these may include triggers. For example, if district utilization goes below 85%, we need to redistrict and reevaluate our property. If 3 or more schools are 98% efficiency, we need to reconsider and look at redistricting. This was the observation heard tonight, that in the north, the schools will be overcrowded, in the south, they won't be. That's before we start moving the non-geographically bound programs. But if we find ourselves with a disparity in with 3 schools overcrowded and other schools not, we need to redistrict. And lastly, disparity in 2 elementary schools where the difference in utilization exceeds 15%. That means some kids are in big schools, some kids, we need to redistribute. The last one here on the front page is to provide the administration direction that says when the elementary, let's get what we got in the schools we have, and when the elementary drops below, pick a number, I put 4,900, the district has to begin redistricting with the goal of closing a school. Because right now, we seem not to be able to if we take the trailers off. On the back, some other activities once Richboro Middle is no longer middle school. Relocation of 24 facilities. Again, that's a repurposing. I don't see getting out of 24 early until Richboro is available to move. The final relocation of the Sloan Alternative School and Twilight School. Again, if it works at the community college, great. If not, Richboro Middle School is a great location. Possibly the sale of 24 after we're out of it, and consider further down the line the possible sale of the Howells tract. I don't see that immediate because I want to make sure all the other checks fall before that. Right now, I don't agree with a sale of any existing school structure or delisting a school with PDE because you can't get back into them. For me, there's details on that. Items I don't want to address at this time. Full-day kindergarten, I'll do deference to Rick. I'm not interested in pursuing full-day kindergarten at this time. I don't think it's a doable thing. I don't think closing an elementary school for 2015-16 is doable. There was a discussion of zero coupon bonds. In my mind, zero coupon bonds are a kick the can down the road issue. Don't want to even bother wasting time with it. Sorry to one of the committees, no pool at South, no stadium at South. The pole barns for equipment storage, I think it's a good topic, but these topics need to take precedence. And lastly, I'm not interested in pursuing it. I think we don't pursue it anymore, the 6 to 8 middle school configuration. I present this, and I apologize for being long-winded, because I think we need to start looking at things in concert. We keep looking at individual items and trying to discuss them. I think we have to look, please, look at it, tear it apart, make a recommendation, but I think we have to look at what our objectives are and then define the tools we're going to use to get to those objectives. So I apologize if it's not much of a discussion. Comments, criticism, work from it, ignore it, whatever.
Comments? Any other comments on capital planning from anyone? Mr. Black?
So we were going to have this meeting at Newtown Middle School, right? And
We were,
and we could,
yeah.
and they would have given us a great welcome, is my understanding, the PTO. But sadly, that didn't happen. But, you know, I just want, I think we're going to begin to move on to talking about the middle schools. I think it'll be a less contentious discussion than the elementary schools. If we do think about the middle schools, I just want to give my opinion that in listening to the capital planning committees, in talking to the folks that have expertise in codes for buildings, and renovating buildings, Newtown Middle is not a renovatable structure. It just isn't. And I think a lot of us think that same way. Professionals, architects don't think it's a road that we can really go down. So that's one of those things that is easy to talk about, because I think the majority of us will say that renovating it doesn't make sense. I think where it gets difficult is, well, if you're going to build it, when do you build it and how big do you make it? And I don't know that we need to pin that down right away. First step is agreeing that we want to do it. So at some point tonight, I'd be interested in people's thoughts about building a new middle school.
So I'm flat out, I'm for building a new middle school at Newtown Middle. I'm for renovating Holland. I'm for moving forward to closing Richboro Middle School as a structure. I'm for all of those things. One of the things I've been doing is trying to formulate ideas that I hear into motions, because ultimately we as a board say we're going to vote on the 6th, but we have yet to put out motions for people. And so I hear I've heard some comments from some board members about voting on a whole plan. And I've heard comments, well, I agree with this or I disagree with that, and people may want to vote in pieces. So my 2 cents from what I've heard from this board is that there'll be a motion to build a new middle school, and people can vote for or against it. And if it doesn't pass, then we say we'll renovate Newtown Middle and no for or against, and then Holland, and then with the idea of closing Richboro. And those are the kind of motions around the middle school that I'm thinking we're going to vote on. Now, if there's agreement among this board to vote on a whole plan that includes everything, but I've heard too many different opinions on too many topics for me personally to think that that's the way we're going to go. But around the middle school, those are the motions that I foresee us developing, and I personally would be, as I said, I don't need to repeat it, on the middle school topic anyway. Mr. Block?
Yeah, so what I was hopeful to hear tonight, and Jerry, I appreciate how you laid this out, was really understanding where other folks stood on some of these issues, all the information we've heard from the community, from the committees, and the administration, which has been great, and sharing where I was as well. You know, a lot of the things, Jerry, that you've laid out here are exactly where I stand. I might slightly disagree in the sense that, you know, modeling a plan for a school closing and creating board direction for administration might fall into that optimize the use of existing facilities. At this point, I'm not sold that we can't close an elementary school yet. I don't believe it's the right thing to do next year. I agree with you there. But I'd like to see what the elimination of trailers and slight redistricting looks like in consideration of all the other proposals to potentially, or that will point to the right decision around closing or not closing an elementary school in 16, 17, 18, with no specific elementary school targeted. I think we need to look at those, and I think your idea of school pairing is great. So from that standpoint, you know, I agree with these. I think we ought to close Richboro. There's huge savings there, especially relative to the other schools that we've discussed. Renovating Holland, building a new Newtown. I agree that we can optimize our space at North by moving out of LSAC. I think we need to do that in a way that is very respectful of the Achieve program and what it does and how it can grow, and I think we can do that over time. But for me, in terms of how we get there, it's about having a plan. A plan doesn't, and long-term plan, consistent with what some of the committees laid out. And that plan needs these activities staged in a timeline that's reasonable, along with the financial implications, as I've said in the last 3 meetings, so we can make a good decision. Now, that plan should be reviewed annually. It should flow into objectives we can set for the administration of that, and it'll allow us to course correct where we see changes in population, as an example. So what I would love to see us do is to vote on a plan on November 6th that contains the elements we're aligned on. And I'd like for the public to be able to see, and for us to be able to see the financial implications, headcount implications, class size implications of that. I believe the administration can get us there. You know, we've got committee meetings next Thursday where we can also work on those, but I believe that based on what people are saying around what they'd like to do, that we can get to a place where we can vote on a plan. So that's where I stand on some of these issues and how we get to them.
Can I ask I would think that if we continue down the path of there are motions put forth on the 6th and we agree with the motions, doesn't that become the basis for a plan that we create? It seems hard for me to believe that between now and November 6th, we are going to be able to come up with a plan of that level of detail. But I agree with you, that's absolutely the direction we need to go toward, absolutely. Not putting it off, not putting off hard work or uncomfortable decisions. But if we make those motions and we say this is where we are at this point, then we begin the process of putting the plan in place of getting to the other side?
The only apprehension for me in taking it piecemeal is it doesn't consider the full financial picture together, and it's not, things aren't done in the context of an overall plan that impacts the education of the taxpayers. So for me, while I believe we should close Richboro, renovate Holland, and build Newtown, I want to see what that looks like over time in the context of everything else we can do. So when I potentially vote to spend money on that new school, that I'm really comfortable in what that means directionally to us over time, given the other changes. So that's why I'd like to see it together, have it staged together, and potentially vote on it together. If nothing else, seeing it together might help folks vote on it together or make me more comfortable kind of taking them all one by one.
I think Andy the difference, it may just be phraseology, which is I think you have to decide what you want to do, because as 9 we'll have many different opinions. Get the list down to be, if you will, November 6th. This is what we intend to do. Get the agreement on the roster of tasks, and then work out the plan to achieve those tasks and the timelines. I think that if we try and, I think we can't, truthfully, there's so many variables to try and model it before you get the roster of an agreement to these are the committed activities that we intend to commit to. You'll be spinning wheels.
Well, I mean, my view is you've laid those out nice. I think we have a bunch of them.
Okay,
We can do that.
Argue. My point is probably
So as far as I'm concerned,
from a motion perspective, the motions are probably the big numbers, and then we work through the details later, but we get the agreement on the motion, on the big numbers.
And just to state the obvious, the big money item is the middle schools.
It is, yes.
And we have as a group, including in finance, laid out some rough estimates of taxation and borrowing to get those projects done. And we can go over it again briefly at the next finance meeting if we have the time to do it.
And savings, ultimately,
That's
when we
right.
close. I mean, yeah, I know we're spending up front, and I'm not trying to diminish that, but the goal is to save the money by closing one of the middle schools.
But that's where all the money is. So all the other pieces, I don't think we need to model in detail from a financial perspective. That's my opinion. So for instance, closing, if we close an elementary school 3 or 4 years from now, it's nothing like what is going to be involved in Newtown Middle. That's a huge amount of money.
I agree, but what I'd like to see is the context in 5 years worth of projected revenues, appropriations with PSERS coming, you know, the debt service that we're going to need to take on. So, you know, I'm saying these are all actions that I support in order to move forward with it. You know, I'd like to see the financial implications
it has to be feasible to do it, otherwise we can't.
Other comments? Mrs. Sexton?
So, I agree with all of what everybody said, okay? I get that there's not enough votes here for the closing of a school this year. Just isn't. There aren't enough votes. I don't agree that there's not enough space. I do agree that there's not enough votes. And so because there are not enough votes,
No, yeah.
I want to,
I'm sorry.
You got to put the mic to you. It's a directional mic.
I can hear you fine, but I'm afraid they can't get you recorded.
All right, now you've completely got me flip-flopped. All right. So for me, Mr. Klein brought forward a plan a week ago and talked about the removal of the trailers and some of the things he believes he can do this time. For me, that's a very minimal approach, and the timeline that we're talking about here is very slow. I really would have preferred to see us take a more proactive approach. I believe that by not acting on closing a school, by not doing a total district redistricting, I mean not just the northern end, but the southern end as well, a cascading redistricting that right-sizes each of the schools. We're not doing right by the people, and we're not doing right by the taxpayer. We're doing a job, but not a whole job. We're just doing a piece. If that's all that can get done, a piece, I'm good with the piece called Take the Trailers Off. One, because it seems insane that we've put, $1 million worth of safety entrances in, and yet we send the kids out the back door to go to the trailers and walk back in the back door. It doesn't make sense to me. But if that's where we are, it's okay. When we left the other night and when we talked about things, one of the things we talked about was removing trailers from all schools, and that included Wrightstown. And in Mr. Klein's presentation, he did send 5th graders and 6th graders out. And then there was discussion. Some people believe that maybe kindergarten and first would be better. I just don't think that it's better that we're sending anybody out. I think that it's doing the wrong thing. I certainly don't think it's good to take 5th and 6th graders out of Wrightstown, put them in Newtown, and segregate them. By keeping them together like that, I don't know what message you're sending. You're telling them that the other kids in Newtown are too frightening to interact with? Or are you telling the Wrightstown kids that they don't have the moxie to get out there and play on the playground with the rest of the kids? I don't understand that, because in September, generally schools reorganize all the classes. And while you might have been in the same classroom with other first graders one year, you might have different second graders the next year. And I know, as strange as this sounds to parents who think that their child, look, I had Mrs. Heenan go check to make sure my son was having somebody talk to him at lunch, because I was at work and she was home. Everybody worries about their kid. That plan does not really work for me. For me, I believe that we have room to do the job whole. To close the school, to move the children once, do it right, do a redistricting now, take the savings out of that we can. Be responsible to use all the space we built. Space in Newtown, space in Goodnoe, space in Holland, space in Churchville, spaces all over the place. Now, Mr. Klein took exception to the word seats. Of course we're talking about children and people's children. Nobody's not talking about people's children. If all we can do is what has been suggested, I say do that. In terms of, I don't know that it's the best. To me, I can't say it the way I mean it. It's half the job, and you can fill in the rest of the words. It is, it's not adequate, but if that's what's to be, that's what's to be. Do the best of that we can possibly do. Newtown. I really think it's sort of hard to say to the community, we don't make use of the space we have, we're leaving spaces empty, we're not utilizing them, we're holding more kids in one building when we could move them to another, and yet we need to build a new school. I have been a huge proponent of building a new Newtown Middle. I didn't want Goodnoe to get renovated. I wanted Newtown to get renovated, and anybody that's been on this board with me knows that. I believe that it shouldn't get renovated. I think that if the studies that Mr. Taylor had done prove that we can build on the land that we own, we should be building new. But I have asked for us to go out and look at other buildings. And at a facilities meeting, Mr. Taylor kind of mocked me for, you want to build a cinder block building? Well, today I walked around all the buildings I was in, and you know what I did? I looked at the construction materials, and a lot of them were cinder block. They were painted lots of different colors, so you didn't look at them and say, oh my God, that's cinder block. You looked at them and said, oh, that looks cute. So there are a lot of different things. I believe that we have a responsibility to go out and look. I've asked for a road trip for a long time. Show us what we're going to buy, because after we built and renovated Churchville, all of us, or a lot of us said, oh, I didn't think that's what it was going to look like. Turned out to be a little airporty in the front instead of Churchville. We saw the plans, but until you really put your fist around it, you don't see it. So I would really like to go out and see some buildings. I would especially like this, at least some people, to take a little tour of some of the buildings in Centennial and see that those buildings that came from 3 schools and into one and hold 800 or 900 kids do so in a very big school, small school way. Each hallway of each wing is a school into itself. They have a community. Every child gets said hello to. They stand in the rain and help them out of the cars. They, like us, have parents that think the rain will make the kids rain. Need to drive them. I'm sad that we're not going to be doing what I think will benefit us in the long term, will show us to be responsible stewards of the buildings that we own. And I do think in the long run that Wrightstown will not be sustainable. Also that Rolling Hills will, over time, be found too to be a building that maybe we'll multi-purpose it for something else, but that's way past my time on this board. All right? That's left to the rest of you or those of you that will come after us. But I just want us to do the best we can and what's right. I really hate to vote yes now on Newtown because I don't think we've proven ourselves. But if that's all I get to do, I do think it's a necessary building. You can't get the savings out of Richboro until you have a place to put the kids. When you talk about a total plan, it grows out of itself. You don't have to make it. I mean, it really just grows out of itself. All of the other parts, we're responsible for all of those things. We have to twine it. How many of you have been there and walked around and been in the little buildings and seen what they do there? We went to the house track the other day. I had never really stood on that land. I'd driven by it, but not stood there. We're the stewards for that. We have to take responsibility for what we're going to do. I can go down some of the road with you. I'm sorry. I think we've done not enough. And I hope that we will be able to do more in the future.
You know, Patty, it's interesting. First of all, you mentioned something which I saw last week. That idea of 5 and 6 being segregated, I have to tell you, just as an idea, it's not right. And it's not right not because of segregation. It's not right because it's not right because it doesn't give you any of the benefits of the increased number of kids in 5 and 6 there. Meaning, if those kids are only enough to support one class and you add one more kid and they have to split the 2, within that building you have those 2 kids in classes of 17 and the other kids in classes of 30. It doesn't work. So for me, it's a pool, and that's because that's the goal. And that's what, when I talk about combining schools, I think that's what I'm talking about, is combining schools. You know that. Yep. The other thing was, that's why while I don't think we can close Wrightstown, that's my position, my opinion, but I think, you know, the closing of the trailers, I had advocated that we shouldn't call this the capital planning committee, because, you know, now when we get to the end of it, if all we do is close schools, it ain't capital. So I think that that's one reason where I speak to that the 5th and 6th grade, while it's unusual, 5 and 6 collector schools are unusual, it generates $1 million a year. If we don't do that, I don't know where we're getting, that's the first million. I don't know where we're getting another chunk of million thereafter. We may get 600,000 or 300,000 from closing, 300 from law school admissions council from a reduced footprint there. But that's going to take 5 years to recoup if we move the NOC, because the NOC move is going to cost 1.5. So it's 5 years, that's a break even, so that's not a savings.
Say that again for me? To move the
To
NOC?
move the NOC is estimated for construction and equipment is a $1.5 million effort.
Wait a minute, didn't,
That's what he said last week.
he said, well, but didn't he also say when it moved from here to there, he put it in the back of the truck and drove it there?
That's fine, it's the construction.
But we could.
Just to change the configuration
the
of the
move.
rooms?
The configuration of
It's
the
not,
space.
it's not the truck rental.
No,
It's-
no,
Yeah.
sorry.
So I guess I hadn't heard that figure. I would have to you'd really have to show me why it should cost.
I'm just working
I
with
mean,
numbers.
we would have to talk that out of facilities as to how that would possibly cost $1.5 million.
Not the message. I'm just-
Is there a project
Don't go
we
back to
do
it.
that does not cost
I'm so kind.
$1.5 million? Is there anything? Honestly,
So
honestly.
my point is, I'm trying to support you, but you're not.
Yeah, I'm trying. I'm trying, Jerry, to walk down the path, but it's not an easy
My
one.
point is that at 300,000 savings for getting out of law school by reducing the NOC, I don't make it up for 5 years because I had to spend the money to move there. So I don't have, as a district, where's my demonstrable savings? And that's where I think that by combining the schools, if you look at Jenny's plan, and in all due respect, I don't think we've charged Mark and the administration to really consider the 5-6 plan. We've kept them very busy with other plans, but I'd like to look at that one in concert with taking the school, the geographically available program movement, because that's the first place. That's the first million. I don't know where we get. I want more millions, but I don't know where to go.
I don't know whether you've gotten mail tonight, but I have gotten a number of pieces of mail that said, how am I ever going to pick up my first grader and then drive really, really quick to get my 5th grader? And how am I going to go to the Halloween parade for my 1st grader and then go really, really fast for my 5th grader? 5th graders are still really young people too. They're 10.
And I think that you're right. I think there's a logistics aspect to it which has to be explored. For me, again, speaking only hypothetically, please, this is not the plan of the district. I'll say that a couple times here. For me, if you were doing a 5th and 6th and you had your choice of schools that would work, for me, the one next to Holland Middle would be Hillcrest, and you potentially would have those 2 buildings running at the same time, because you're right. I don't think, the bus, and by the way, you also pointed out that our children aren't they're sweet, but they're not made of sugar and they don't melt in the rain. Parents who have to pick up their kids, that's why buses exist too. It's not a perfect world, and there will be sacrifices made by many people. But if we don't make those sacrifices, other people will make sacrifices and continue to make sacrifices, and it's kind of doing better means everybody has to pay some price.
Mr. Abramson?
I think what we do have to discuss is some of Jerry's items that he has on the second page at the bottom, items not to be addressed at this time. We could take some of these items out of the equation perhaps, and we can discuss that, but there is one item I would like to add also to that. That one item that won't be addressed and won't be done is any action that will impair our class size guidelines. And Patty, your suggestion, I think, would do that. Close an elementary school, you remove the trailers. My fear is that's going to do exactly that, impair the class size guidelines. So I would add that to Jerry's list.
It'll hurt the class size guidelines?
You wouldn't modify, you wouldn't increase the
I would think it would.
I don't know, and I think that that would really have to be shown to me, which I don't really, I haven't felt, and I've talked with others and asked, did you see that detail, that level of detail about how far up the class size will go, or what would it do? What it means is that you have to redistrict more broadly. You have to engage more buildings.
And that would be the issue, whether any redistricting can.
Right, so it's how broad it's
So,
going to be. Our class size limits are there. I didn't suggest changing them.
No, but maybe your suggestion about, at the end of the school year, closing an elementary school and removing all the trailers will necessarily result in an increase in our class size guidelines.
I don't know, because the number of kids actually in trailers, Rick, what is the exact number of children that we have full day outside? Full day outside. Do they exist? Full day outside.
We could ask the administration if that, and we had this conversation today, Mark, whether or not that would happen, but it may be an exercise in futility because you said that you don't think you have the votes anyway for the,
Not right
for it,
now, but
so-
see, I think if we had done a more broad redistricting, we might have had a better sight.
So with all that said, I think we do have to discuss, before we move on to a general plan or other votes, taking some of these things out of the equation that Jerry did list. The other thing is, and I agree with you, Bill, that we don't have to decide when we decide if we decide to build Newtown Middle School, we don't have to decide at that time on the size, and I said that before, but I think we do have to decide as a necessary component, if we're going to build new or renovate, whether we are going to change the middle school configuration to a 6 to 8. Jerry has it on an item not to be addressed.
For me, not to be addressed.
Right, that's what I'm saying, but, and if the board discusses that and we say, fine, we don't want to address it, I think then we can have a better idea what the size is going to be. Or if the knock is going to be put, instead of another location, in Newtown Middle School, we have to take that into consideration also, whether we're going to renovate or build new. My guess is if we're going to renovate, it's not going to be going into Newtown Middle School. But if you build new, you can build around that. So, so again, I think Jerry's on the right track. We try to take some of these items out of the equation and then go on from there.
I thought we had already taken 6 to 8 out of the equation.
I think it's already,
That was my recollection.
I don't,
At the
I know we had a
Saturday-
discussion on it and it seemed that way, but
Yes, that's what it was, at the discussion, in that way.
I didn't agree with it, but it did appear that the majority of the board did take that out of the equation. Can I?
Yes, Ms. Brooks, sorry.
So, I remain unconvinced on whether or not Wrightstown can or cannot close. I believe, based on looking at the numbers and the working of the data that I've done, that it is possible to close it. But I've asked for data to support that. So to be clear, when I say that I think it can close, I say that it can close because I don't think the educational program will be compromised. I don't think class sizes will be compromised. I don't think schools will be overcrowded. If any of those conditions were to happen, I wouldn't want to close the school. So it's not like I'm looking to close the school for the sake of closing a school. I believe that our goals can be met, trailers off, class sizes maintained, quality of education maintained, no overcrowding. Now, there's been a lot of criticism and discussion about the October 9th meeting, so I just want to make very clear why I did not necessarily want that presentation done that night. It was not because I don't believe in transparency. That's the last thing that I'm about. That presentation came to us at 4:30 before the 7:30 meeting. And while it was argued that that is a presentation of the administration, it's not like a presentation where we look at Keystone scores or PSSA scores that are informational. The presentation that was made is one that the board ultimately has to comment on and that the community gets behind. If I believed that what was presented on October 9th was the only way to redistrict and the only way to get Wrightstown to close, even I would not have voted for it. That plan made no sense to me. I wished and hoped that I would have the time to talk to the administration, for the way I viewed it would be possible to close Wrightstown. I would never put 37 sections into Newtown when it can only hold 35. I didn't agree with some of the numbers that showed buildings were at capacity. So I would have looked at a totally different approach. I feel absolutely horrible by the number of emails, phone calls, meetings that I've had with people that have had unbelievable anxiety over what those redistricting plans look like. I would have never divided a neighborhood. I would never vote to have a walker be bused to a school. So to me, it was just a premature plan. So my not wanting to discuss that plan was because I didn't think it was fair. It was too early to release it and have that conversation. And as a result, now for all these weeks, there's been a lot of anxiety for the community, for board members, for parents. And really, to me, it wasn't a feasible plan. So to have that much anxiety produced, I think is unfortunate, and I apologize for that. In the discussion of what the savings would be in closing Wrightstown, Mark's plan, which admittedly it can't work, but even in that plan, it showed the reduction of 2 staff members. So the savings of closing Wrightstown is more like $1 million. To address the comments that have been said tonight and in many meetings about achieving a 700-person school, I want to explain that for me, you can't have 700-person schools because we have the schools that we have. Some of them are naturally going to be bigger. Some of them are naturally going to be smaller because that's how they were built. And so when 700 came out of the Capital Planning Committee, it was really more like a hypothetical conversation that showed that a larger building had a greater efficiency, and that on average, that's where, what the number would look like in our district. Now, if we believed as a board that our school should be 700 students, it's a little too late. We've built Goodnoe to be considerably bigger already. But we can't use the excuse that saying filling that school shouldn't happen because it becomes a super school, because we've just put $20 million into that. How could we not fill it with seats? The same is true for Holland Elementary. We spent $18 million, created a school that has a capacity over 500 students, and there's just over 300 students in it. That makes no sense. You have to fill the schools. If we're going to renovate them, there has to be a plan to actually put students into them. And the issue for Wrightstown is that, someone said put an addition on it. You know what? If that school could be renovated to a school that was actually an efficient size, that would be worthy of talking about. But that school can never get any bigger than what it is right now. The best you could do is add 5 classrooms on to replace the trailers. If you were to do that, if we were to build a brand new school like on the House track or someplace else, we would never build a school whose capacity was 300 students. I don't believe we would. And so that's the difference, I think, between, someone said, why not Rolling Hills? Rolling Hills is not a sustainable school either in the condition it is. But if something dramatic happened, that school could be expanded. There is no limitation to, there are limitations, we'd have to have studies done, but I'm saying it's not as limited as what a Wrightstown expansion would be. And so, I'm not sure what all the buzzing is about. You'll have an opportunity of public comment. But when we talk about parity between the schools, for me, it is not parity in the size of schools because we can never achieve that. The parity that I want is in the experience of the students and in how the education is delivered. And for that reason, that was why I favor a K-1 configuration in Wrightstown and a 2-6 in Newtown, because that creates a parity of a K-6 experience with a community that endures. That is my opinion. And I have said to others in the Wrightstown community, I want the trailers off. If the vote is and the preference is for a K to 4, I personally do not think that that is best for kids, the best choice for kids. I still believe that a K to 1 is, but either way, the priority is taking off the trailers. And if the community doesn't feel like that we've had enough of an opportunity to talk the merits of K1 or K4, that's fine. I don't think that that delays a vote of this board to say that those trailers are coming off. I think we can make a vote on November 6th to take all the trailers off, and if we need extra time to figure out what that looks like for Wrightstown, that I think that we have to have that have its full vetting.
Others want to speak? Ms. McKessie?
Feel on some level that we're all saying similar, if not the same thing. I would like to move forward with the middle schools. I would like to build a new Newtown Middle School. Patty, Doug, and I will talk tomorrow and throw some dates out for tours and to take the show on the road, as you say. I am in favor of starting some process of looking into costs associated with renovating Holland. I am not talking about stopping any progress. I think we would be well served and the community would be well served. I'm not in favor of closing an elementary school next year. I would like to take some time to look at all these configurations, possible configurations. Let's set a deadline, let's set some time to do that, but we haven't taken enough time to really look at the 5-6 centers option, to consider what the K through 4 means or K through 1 means. We can do that next year, this year. You will still be here to be part of that and to do that. And then, identify what we need to do the following year with, getting as many modulars as we can possibly get offline. I'm not trying to kick it down the can. I'm not trying to kick the can down.
I mean all modulars. All.
Okay.
Can I just...
Anyone? Mr. Groff?
Just, I take some notes occasionally. The person who gave us, I just want, because you'll have a chance to speak, thank you for the pictures when you spoke about Newtown Middle School and the crack in the floor. Just so, because it runs through many buildings, and I'll look at Doug, who will energetically contradict me, within, or not, within our buildings there are expansion joints in the floor, and while it is not preferable or planned stress relief, so when you have a crack like that that runs through many floors, yes, it does present potentially a trip hazard. Yes, we're talking about replacing the building, but I want you to be aware the building is not going to be like California and fall into the sea. It's actually a planned expansion joint. I suspect, Doug, when you look at these, that
I didn't see the photo, but there is an old pipe chase beneath the floor, and there is an expansion joint that
runs on top of it,
parallel to the exterior
through
wall.
many, yeah.
It's very well that joint.
So I just want you to be, I want you to think the building it's not falling down, it is not unsafe, it is just not, I don't think it's a sustainable building. Can we, as a group, I guess, we talked about, we've gone through a few of these generalities a few times tonight and talked about, well, I think I hear, can we, if not formal motions, can we at least get a nod of where we're going on some of the topics?
Well, in all fairness, Mr. Bialik was very, very concerned about not being here tonight, and my answer is no, if you want to know the truth. Plain and simple, well, I know you never listen to me anyway. Plain and simple, I think having discussion, and he'll have the opportunity to watch this, but what I would like to do is take a stab at putting some motions together. If you all have motions, email them to me. We'll make a grand list of them, and we'll put them out there. I think voting tonight in any capacity would be, we've told people we'll vote on the 6th. I believe we should stick to that.
I'm not recommending we vote. What I'm trying to figure out is what issues, we've heard members say, well, I don't think I have 5 votes to close Wrightstown, or, and I'm just trying to figure out where are we, because at least...
Well, we're going to take a vote, whether we want to close
My point was that there are, put the big rocks in first. Let's try and figure out where there's agreement on the board so we can get those things done, because otherwise what will naturally happen is will absorb a lot of time and we'll walk away with very little done. So I'd like to understand, is there general consensus around, what is there general consensus around? At the highest level, the big numbers on the thing, you don't have to agree with the underlying principles. I don't think anybody's going to say number one and number two, which were safety and reducing expenditures. I'm not even going to ask, because if anybody says no, they should leave now. But number three, we're talking about optimizing the facilities. So unfortunately for A, did everybody agree last time that eliminating the trailers was something to do, that we were looking to do next year?
I think personally, I think the problem with that is it's too general. You know, I'm for eliminating the trailers. I like the plan that Mr. Klein put forth. I don't care if they keep 2 for storage till they figure out where they can put storage.
Neither do I.
But I did hear that from Ms. Sexton.
Well, I'd also like to see, I emailed Mr. Klein earlier this week to see what we can do to remove trailers off of Richboro Middle.
Mr. Holohan and I walked through the building today. We probably can get 1, maybe 2 off. The third one's going to be hard. It may require some interior renovations to move a program inside, but we're working on that.
Okay,
well,
so
that's great.
At this point then,
that's great news.
Certainly
But I don't want to vote to.
I understand that, but the point of the discussion is, so the object is right now, I'm sure we get agreement around elementary trailers.
Well, I don't know, because then if you're going to take them off Wrightstown, then you get to decide, there may be people who vote to close Wrightstown. There may be people who say to take the trailers off. There may be people say, I want to vote to take them off and do K to 4. I want to take them off and do K to 1.
So
there are a lot of different options. Do I think people don't want to do anything? But I think you just have to.
So I don't know clearly whether I heard what you said. So in terms of Mr. Klein's plan, I said what I said last week. I believe it's housekeeping. I believe it's something we should be doing no matter what. That keeping buildings running with heat and electricity and air conditioning that are holding stuff, it's really a bad idea. And so I'm good with his plan. It's meager to me. It is housekeeping that we should have done all along, but doing it is good. Let's do it. That's a start.
Yeah, I didn't mean to portray that you were saying no to that.
But if we can't even do that,
I think we can make a motion that says that we will remove the trailers from the elementary school for all students. So that leaves, the storage, I mean, if we can do less than 2, that would be my preference. The sooner they all go, that's fine.
And to Mr. Bloch's point, we might be able to say.
Take them offline as educational spaces.
Correct. And I would like to see if we could wrap, as this gets fleshed out further, if we can wrap Richboro Middle into that as well.
And then to what Jerry's laid out and what I've said in the past, as you start to pull those off, and as the administration and building principals look at the usage of their schools, that starts to tell a story around if and when it makes sense to consolidate an elementary school and which one.
Right, but I don't think that it needs to involve a decision on K to 4, K to 6, or whatever else we're going to do, because if we can agree that the trailers come off, we know that building cannot be sustained as a K to 6 school unless we did a major redistricting and then there was 1 section per grade, which I think nobody would think is educationally sound.
So economically affordable either.
Or that too. And just the redistricting logistics, they don't necessarily live in the right places that you need that. But
My assumption then that those plans, those ideas will go into facilities. That committee will talk about it and bring them back to us and say, you charged us with this and this is how, are you saying it shouldn't come back to us at all? It should just happen and whatever the administration thinks, or are you saying it should come back to the board with how they're going to do it?
For the configuration?
Yeah.
Oh, I think it should, but I don't know that it's facilities. It might be academic standards.
Well, whatever, but I'm just saying, it's got to get talked about.
Right,
and
but
then
I'm just
come
saying
back.
that I don't think that piece of it needs to be tied into a motion on November 6th.
Correct, I don't either.
Yeah, the November 6th to me is more about a high-level plan, again, that's
Giving
evaluated
direction,
over
right?
time.
Giving direction.
That's looked at every single year based on what's happening. It's our roadmap, and the decisions that we're making to lay that pathway are thoughtful, based on information, based on public input, and we're going to start following that path. We've got a sense of where we're going, and we'll adjust as we run into things that change or things we might not have seen.
Jerry, can I ask a question?
Please.
Model a plan for closing a school when elementary enrollment drops below 4,900. Where did you come up with that number?
I offered well, what's our current enrollment, Mark?
5230.
5230. It was a wag, a wild guess, fill in the middle word, Patty would say. It was, pick a number.
One person got your joke.
Yeah, exactly. It was, you had to pick a number somewhere. I'm open to whatever number you want to do. I picked it, I was thinking, you know, our enrollment was a little higher for some reason. I was looking at an older number when I was doing it. That I was looking at when you got down by a size that would be about a school, you'd eliminate a building. You'd look at a building.
So you're just, it's like class size guidelines. You're just coming up with we should be coming up with a number that is a guideline.
It really says,
the red flag.
you know, when capacity, when you drop to that level, if you populated the schools, if we take the trailers offline and we populated the schools and we've got them, and I have to tell you, you know, I advocated before, and I want to be very clear about it. I think you have to leave, if we left one room open in every school, you know, a couple of years ago we had a water fountain break, and we had to close a room. You know, we had someone break a thermometer one time, we had to close a room. You have to have a little bit of capacity because things happen. You know, a child gets sick in a room, you have to close the room you have to have some capacity. So once you though reduce your population to a number, it may be 4,600, maybe that's a better number, you will have accumulated enough space in the school that now you got to consolidate that space by closing a school. Conversely, but to be fair, and it's a good point, which says, what number do we look at to go the other way? And that's where both of these, I think we have to be correct and to do it right, we need to set as a board direction the administration says, here's your lower limit, here's your upper limit, you need to start moving and doing once you go outside those limits. We do it with Bob Reiner. When we say, hey, if your money in your budget, if your budget runs over so much money, you have so much left, you have to move more than 4% into, is it more than 5% into capital reserve. We do it financially.
The thing is this, the money is the money. There's no subjective in it. It's $20, it's $20. There's no subjective. It's a room. Well, is it a big room? Is it a small room?
I agree.
Is it a room that we're going to use for science, or could we use it for English? What kind of a room is it? So therein lies the crux of the problem. You know, is it appropriate for an elementary school child? Is it appropriate for a middle school? That's where, when we say, how many rooms do we have? We get one opinion, and we get another opinion. We look at it ourselves, we come up with all kinds of views over what are rooms. And so it's not like the money. That is the crux of the problem.
Well, my point here was, thank you for asking a question, Kyle, about where I picked up the number. At some point...
You don't make many wild guesses.
No, not really. Not in many years. My point was, once we optimize the use of the buildings, and we get the kids into hard walls, let's take that number and say 400, 500, 600, down from that. What's the number? That's when the administration has to look at what are we doing to redistrict and close a building.
I have to tell you, for me, because as I've said, I don't think we can close it in 15, 16, but I do think if enrollment keeps going down, we definitely have to. I don't know. I'd be interested to have the administration take a look at your WAS number and see what their thought is. But I like the idea of adopting a number that says this board has been committed to, if elementary enrollment there you go. If elementary enrollment gets to a certain point.
Really, did they school?
Live on CRTV. If elementary, I like the idea. I like the idea of being able to commit to that, and I'm a little bit in the
pick a number.
In the similar place of Mr. Block. I don't. If things keep going the way they are, and I told you, I've said many times that I believe in Plan 1, which closed Wrightstown in 2018, that it's going to happen if the enrollment keeps being looked at. I can't sit here today and decide that because I don't know what's going to happen in enrollment, but I have to tell you, and I said it last week, the whole idea of you're all here now and kicking it down the road and leaving you out there, I mean, that's not attractive to me, but the facts are the facts. If enrollment keeps going down, something has to be done. For me right now, I believe taking the trailers off and making that step. Now we have kids inside the buildings, and saying, when enrollment gets to this point, a school's gonna have to go. And I hope you will all stay engaged and follow it. But I'm certainly not saying it's never gonna happen. I'd even say that when it gets to this point, it is going to happen.
So that's keeping in mind that we are already 14, 15, 1,600 kids down from 2006.
And 38 trailers short,
Okay?
for me.
So.
So
if
we'll
we-
add
if-
Jerry's 400 on top.
So now, well, if we can't figure out how to close one now, to wait for a whole nother school to drop out, that number's probably a little bit low. But I think what we do is you take the first step, which is a great first step, but while we're doing that, we do the work, because we'll be able to see if we need to take the second step. There's some redistricting probably
The problem
needs to happen.
that a 4,900 number presents is it doesn't address the issues that are created in, regional parts of things. We have, we put all this money into Holland and hundreds of seats are empty. We're about to open, right now, Goodnoe is functioning as a school, and this September there'll be 8 more classrooms. And maybe there are a couple of things going on, but I believe there's space. If we're putting money into the renovations of these buildings, you can't wait until an overall population comes down. You have to be looking at them.
Well, I don't think it
You have
precludes
to look
looking
at
at,
every year, so
yeah,
if you need to redistrict
agreed.
things around. I mean, what
Agreed.
Jerry's saying
That was
is
number
it's more,
6.
it's more strategic than it is tactical around.
Right.
It's, hey, we're gonna move, we're gonna look at redistricting to get the capacity that we need.
Number
And if we
6 on
move
my
folks-
list addressed
Yeah.
that issue, which was if there's disparity in population or capacity in the individual schools, you have to redistrict. This is really, 7
But
is just about
isn't there
closing a
now?
school.
Isn't there now? Have you applied those percentages to what we got going right now?
I'm for redistricting. So I'm
So, I mean,
good for
that,
redistricting globally, strongly, get the kids, get the buildings optimized across the district. You and I actually are aligned on that, which is, for me, only doing that and potentially implementing a different organization of the schools is going to reduce our number of sections. And that's where the savings is. The savings is in staff.
it's in staff, because that's where our money goes, 80%
Correct.
of our money.
And that's why I want to do something with staff. For me, I want to do something that affects the number of sections, the number of staff members for next year, in concert with bringing the trailers offline. I don't want to be like Kennedy. We don't go to the moon because it's easy. We go to the moon because it's hard. We redistrict because it's hard, because the value, like going to the moon, as Kennedy perceived in his inauguration, going to the moon was worth something. Doing the work of redistricting is worth something financially. And we do it now because it's hard. And we do it now.
Any other comments? Okay, we're going to move on to public comment. Public comment's an opportunity for members of the public to address the board. We'd like you to limit your comments to no longer than 3 minutes. Please consider the fact that there may be young children in the audience or watching the broadcast on CRTV. It is our goal to maintain a respectful environment so that members of our community have an equal opportunity to address the board without interruption. While the board welcomes your ideas and will consider them in deliberating an issue, we may not respond to your comments or questions. Please come to the mic, state your name and your town. Just come on up. If you want to speak next, please just come along the wall.
Hello, everybody. I am Chris Williams. I'm from Wrightstown. I've been coming here, like a lot of these folks, since June or July, and I actually haven't gotten up very much and spoken. Usually by the end of the meeting, I'm fairly frustrated and upset. And to be honest with you, I'm just going to ask a couple of questions, and I know that you don't have to address me, you don't have to answer me, but quite specifically, can anyone up here tell me why Wrightstown Elementary School cannot be expanded above 5 classrooms?
Since I made that comment, I will just say that that was the information that Doug Taylor provided to the board in a document. So if that is in fact not true, then that can be corrected, but I stated it because it came from the administration.
Okay. Mr. Taylor?
I'm going to have to take a look at that document before I get back to you.
Okay, I appreciate
Yeah,
that.
sure.
I think I'm not trying to persecute you, Ms. Brooks, or anyone else up
I
here.
just want to make it clear that I didn't make that up, that I got that information from the administration, and that is part of how I've deliberated.
I'm in
That's
no
all
way saying that you have, but I think that that's something that you've all said a number of times, and we've all heard it, and we've all said it. There's a lot of facts, and my dad said something to me, figures can lie and liars can figure, and you can look at things a lot of different ways, and you can look at numbers, and we may all see the same study very, very differently, and I know that's what leads to all this confusion. A number of you have said on a number of occasions over the last 4 or 5 months, I believe these kids can fit. I believe these schools can close. Show it to me. Let me see well, we've seen a lot of different ideas and models that say they cannot fit. This school cannot close. These ideas are not going to come to fruition the way they are, in so much as that a number of you even believe that a vote to close an elementary school right now can't happen. And yet we keep saying, but I believe in miracles or Santa Claus or whatever it is. Well, prove it. I understand that a number of you have said, I think this can continue to be discussed. When you come up with a plan, with a factual, numerical, thought out, this is how it will work, I'd love to hear it. Because I agree, we want to save money. We do. This is a situation where we aren't naive enough to stand here and say, honestly, you know how I got here? I came the first night afraid that this room was going to be full of hysterical mommies from Wrightstown going, no, don't close my school. And I wanted to be a voice of reason. I got it. There was 3 of us, which was pretty sad. And now there's a lot more than 3. But that's not what's going on. We aren't going to say close or don't close Wrightstown Elementary because I live in Wrightstown or because I'm a parent of a Wrightstown Elementary School student. This, I think you all know, for a lot of us, for Jenny Schottmiller, for Amy McIntyre, and a lot of us, has gone far beyond that. This is about what's right for Council Rock. And enrollment has not continued to drop this 1 year. It's just 1 year. It's only like, 70 kids. It's not that big of a number. But we keep talking about it like it's skyrocketing to the basement, and it is not. So we just ended our umpteenth meeting here with yet not a single motion, not a single plan on what we are going to figure out. Still, Ms. Thomas has been saying this for 4 or 5 weeks, like, here's a list, can we do this? Nothing. But I believe. Well, believe in a vote, believe in a plan, come up with some motions. The rhetoric makes sense. I don't think any of you are intentionally trying to derail this. Well, I'd like to think that not anybody here is intentionally trying to derail this. And, well, my last comment, I guess, is not well served at the moment with not everybody in attendance, but thank you for your time.
Jenny Schottmiller from Wrightstown. I just wanted to expand on something a little. Well, let me just say this. I agree with the previous comment. A lot of what I've done and said here has been about saving money. My husband never gets to come because he's either out of town or he's home with the kids, so I can come. But if he was to come, he would tell you, they're going to spend how much on the middle schools? Where are they going to save it? He would like to see this district run more efficiently. Me too. People that I talk to, that's really a winning argument. We're making this change, and it might be a little difficult, but we're going to save money. That's people like that. We're a lot of educated people in this district, and we understand you need to be more efficient. You need to save money. One of the reasons I said to look at the north-south boundary is because if you look at where we are now, north has about 45% of the population. South has about 55% of our population in the high school level. If you look at what recommendation 1 did and they sent Richboro up to the north, it just reverses it. So they're unbalanced in the other direction. North is 55% and south is about 45%. I think that you could potentially either expand Wrightstown or build on the House track, send about half of Richboro up to the north. And I know this won't be sort of a popular thing, but I'm listening when I hear that those 2 buildings, particularly Wrightstown and Rolling Hills are very expensive to renovate, and a lot of work is needed. If you could send about half, because if you send all Richboro up, it's too much, about half up to the north area, your high schools will be about 50-50. You'd still have plenty of room at north to move the knock there, and maybe some other things too. When they're about 50-50, your middle schools are about the same size. Talk about parity. You'd have parity at the middle level. And when you did that, you could potentially redistrict the district and close both of those two really expensive schools. So I know that's not popular, but I am here seriously about being efficient, and I hear that, and that's what I'm interested in also. I just want to reiterate that when we're looking at redistricting and we're looking at closing schools, that we're looking at atypical spaces. It's great to get rid of all the trailers, but to me, kids being educated in closets that are designed for storage doesn't scream quality education in Council Rock. And I'm proud of this district, and I love this district, and I think if we can fit in our buildings, that's great, but I wouldn't like to see us close a school when we're squeezed in and shoved in and using these spaces that were never designed to be educational spaces. Thank you.
Jane Magny, Wrightstown Township. Actually, I wanted to ask that same question, why Wrightstown Elementary couldn't be expanded. Certainly, I know that the spray irrigation system would have to be expanded, but it can be. I spoke to the fellow that designed it recently. So I'm rather confused by that statement myself. Also, even though Wrightstown and Upper Makefield have firm commitment to preserving open space, both of those townships still have the potential of further build out, more so than what do the other municipalities in Council Rock. As a matter of fact, we have a few houses, 10 houses, that's not a lot, coming online very soon. We have the Hibbs property that continues to be built out. It nearly is, but we certainly won't see the children for a short time. That will be coming from there. So I really do anticipate more children coming into the Wrightstown school system there, or to the school there. So saying that we're losing children, and it sounds like we have, some 700 over the last few years, it doesn't seem to be coming from the part of the school district in the upper part of it, in the northern part, so much as in the southern part. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Tim Downs. I live in Richboro. Just as a reminder, my group put together recommendation 1. First off, I'd like to start by thanking the administration. I think they and their spouses are probably the unsung heroes here. Many hours they have put in here, so I certainly appreciate that, and certainly Mark, to you as well. I certainly probably will not in a public forum have an opportunity to thank you, so it's been a wonderful experience, and I have certainly gained as much as I've given into this process, so thank you for that.
Same here, Tim.
What I'm hoping to do is, the board has gotten a lot of suggestions and ideas over the last 4 or 5 months. I'm here to hopefully give a little context and approach to hopefully help guide your next week as you move forward. As a reminder, when the committee first came together, the capital planning committee, the board gave us some instructions and direction, which I think showed clarity way back when. And I'm not going to read through it all, but just to point out a couple things. One of the areas that I focused on quite a lot working in the committee and through the subgroups was we're assembling a committee to address using our facilities in the most efficient and effective ways consistent with our current educational policies and procedures. So it's stressing most efficient and effective ways possible. That's what the committees were tasked with and what we focused on. Some considerations were removing the trailers and finding alternative school, network operations center, Twining Ford road activities, shipping, storage, etc. Assume the district disposes of LSAC and Twining Ford road suites. Once again, things we should consider. The goals, each alternative must include actionable plan. Example, renovate school X in such and such a way. Advantages of trade-offs, including but not limited to operating cost, capital costs, preserving the current community look and feel, and providing for growth and innovation. and also to include timelines with measurable outcomes, both short and long term. So I'm hoping this is what the board had asked the committee to do, and I would hope the board is going to do the same in the delivery of their ultimate plan that they put together. But the board did ask the committee to come together, and we first came together back on November 14th, 2013. We delivered our final proposals on June 18th, 2014. So we were together for 32 weeks. In that time, we met as a committee, a whole committee, approximately 6 times. And as subgroups, I know I met no less than 12 times with the subgroups. So we were meeting essentially every other week coming together. And that was even in the midst of one of the worst winters we've ever had. During that time, we reviewed capacity analysis, final budgets, strategic plans, capital improvement plans, the Pell study. We had presentations from Mr. Reinhardt on the capital needs and on the debt service 101. We had staffing demographics provided to us. We had insight tutorials. We visited the schools. We had a community that came together and went through all the different things and viewed all that different documentation coming together with our proposals. They were certainly well thought out. So why do I share these fond memories with you now? One, to encourage the board to reread the proposals. A lot of what is being talked about today is addressed in there. You want to talk about parity? There's a lot of parity in there. You want to talk about planning and cost? A lot of them are in the proposals. So I would encourage the board to reread those proposals. But also, when I look back, the board looks a lot like we did as committee members early in our process. We had to bring many disparate opinions together, and we were all over the place, but it started to take shape as I started to see tonight. And we had a list, Jerry, like you put together, and we voted on it, and we started to narrow the list down as to what we wanted to include and what we didn't want to include. And we voted on them, we prioritized them, what was the most important for us to achieve. We were also very diligent in driving to what the costs were, what was the impact, what was the trade-off of doing decision A versus decision B. I feel what the board really needs to do is come together and come up with that ultimate plan that's going to answer all the questions. As Mr. Block said, you're not going to have a plan that may be executionable for 7 years, but each year you visit it. Determine, is the population still on track for what we thought to be able to renovate this school or close that school? You need cohesion, and you certainly need a plan. Certainly, if 3 teams of 10 to 15 community members can do it, I'm sure 9 school board members can do it. Last, I will close with, we are a strong community here in Council Rock School District. We are resilient. We will get by with a plan that is approved. There will not be a mass exodus of people out of this area, fleeing their homes, watching, the market value of their homes plummet. That's not going to happen. But as stated before, I think no action is probably the worst thing that can be done. Thank you.
John Roche, Wrightstown Township. One of the things I think that's a crucial element between a governing body and the people it's governing is the level of trust. As you can tell from my comments both tonight and at other meetings, my level of trust is not 100% with what some of the board members are intending to do. And part of that is because of the history that this board, not these particular members, but this board did have information for many, many years about what could be done, and nothing was being done. And in keeping with that, what concerns me about some of the discussion tonight is when numbers seem to get thrown around, talking as if today is ground zero. Talking as if, well, if enrollment goes down from here, then we'll start talking about closing schools. If I heard correctly, I believe the superintendent said current enrollment at the elementary schools is about 5,211 or something. That was after Mr. Grubb had indicated, well, we should really put in a policy about closing schools under some number, and let's pick 4,900. Doesn't seem that much lower than 5,200. Well, according to a report on the council Rock School District website, as of October 2014, elementary school enrollment is 5,430. Is the information on the website incorrect?
No, I misspoke, Mr. Chair.
Okay. So this goes to a level of trust, because in this conversation, we have the appearance to the public of, well, we'll be ready to close the school if the enrollment goes down by around 220, when the number is really over 500 that it would have to drop from where it is today, which is already many fewer students than where it was in 2007, when it was clear we had too many schools. Do you realize that people do have memories? People can add. People can read websites. It's embarrassing to sit here and watch what's going on. You've known for a long time that this should be done. And now it seems that you're trying to find a new way to kick the can down the road. You can decide anything you want and implement it later. The idea of not voting to close a school now, because it would be too soon to close it in the school year coming up, doesn't mean you can't vote to close a school down now. You can vote to close a school down and say it will be done in year 1, year 2, or year 3. But the idea that all we'll do is take off the modulars and then see how the schools look after that gives me no reason to trust that any decision is ever going to come that reflects the reality in this district. And the reality is, we have more students in 1997 before we build 2 schools. And yet now we're saying we need every one of them. It's absurd, and I continue to lack trust in what's going on at these meetings.
Kelly Wattenegger, South Feinstone. The recent proposals to close Wrightstown Elementary School have sparked discussions and possible plans to redistrict throughout Council Rock. 3 developments that currently go to South Feinstone, Rosefield, Eagleton Farms, and Linton Hill Chase, could be redistricted to Newtown Elementary School. We oppose this plan. As parents and community members, we are highly concerned about the impact this shift will have on our children and the children of affected families emotionally, academically, and socially. It is our hope that if redistricting occurs, grandfathering these children that have already commenced school at South Feinstone will take place. Enrolling and entering into elementary school comes with the expectation that the school will become a child's home away from home for the next 6 to 7 consecutive years. It is at elementary school that children break into the school setting. It is there that they are, for the first time, exposed to professional teachers and established schedules, where they form relationships, make friends, and learn. It is an elementary school where children carve out their niche and develop a comfort zone. Removing our children, all of our children, from this environment prior to the next mandated move, e.g. middle school, is essentially making them go through a transition twice, once to Newtown Elementary and then again to middle school. Such a plan is an unnecessary disruption that could negatively impact their self-esteem, focus, and performance in school. The Capital Planning Committee's proposals identified several objectives, 2 of which are promote optimal social and educational environment and allow for students to remain together, elementary, middle, and high school. Taking our children out of South Feinstone will result in the exact opposite of these objectives. One board member just last week said she had difficulty with 4th grade students moving into a brand new school for 5th grade. That would be happening. We did our research when selecting our home and did so with the knowledge that our children would be attending South Feinstone. As such, we ask that you please consider our request to grandfather our children at South Feinstone. We don't foresee busing being an issue. We're talking maybe 2 to 3 buses to handle these developments, and over time, this number would decrease. It is our sincere hope that you will hear us and will not force our children to move out of South Feinstone until they have reached middle school. Thank you for your consideration in this matter. It is greatly appreciated.
Nancy Carroll, Newtown Borough. Tonight I'm mourning because it seems like the district is no longer considering the main reason why the Capital Planning Committee was formed. It was my understanding that we were supposed to look at the data to meet the charge of aging infrastructure, declining enrollment, and rising educational costs, and find effective and most efficient ways to use the facilities. And another consideration was to take off all chairlers. It would then be up to the board whether they wanted to accept the suggestions or not. So the committee I was on decided to make CR more efficient. It would take out the students in Wrightstown who lived in Northampton for busing considerations, and then looked at Newtown, Goodnoe, and South Finestone, since their peak enrollment numbers and the peak number of sections and the added classrooms since 2002, as well as the amount of large classrooms, 111 versus 96 needed for current sections. We looked at Schrader's 212 existing capacity numbers and the 100% capacity numbers, and we decided that students in Wrightstown would fit into Newtown, Goodnoe, and South Finestone. We proved by the numbers they would fit. The only criteria that made them not fit was Schrader's 90% numbers. And after examining the report very closely for the 90% and how he did his calculations by leaving out some regular ed rooms that were on the schematic or on the Plancom Act 34 hearing booklets, and the number of large classrooms that are being used for small group instructions, that adhering to the 90% in face of all other considered criteria would be an inefficient use of buildings. We wanted to save Wrightstown for the community and to save as much money as possible and solve some other inefficiencies in the district. So we suggested repurposing all of LSAT's functions into Twining Ford and Twining Ford into Wrightstown to keep that building in the community. When Mark Klein's closing Wrightstown plan overfilled South Finestone by 23 students, and then beyond even Schrader's 100%, and overfilled Newtown beyond its historical peak and beyond Schrader's 100% by 21 students, then put 79 less students in Goodnoe than even Schrader's 100%. This is more than math mischief to prove it doesn't fit. This is math obstructionism. We have to ask, if we would put Wrightstown in, is there room for growth? So even using Mark Klein's South Finestone demographics that are up on the web, you look at what his 2015 projections are. So for K, there's 67 students. That would leave 8 empty seats, and they're seats when students aren't in them. In first grade, 103 would leave 12 empty seats. In second grade, 106 leaves 24 empty seats. And in total, there would be 100 empty seats, even after just adding one more section. And another way to look at it, are we having in-migration? So a realtor has up on her web the single-family home sale since 2002 for Council Rock. And the year that had the most sales was 2005 at 1,101. And then it went as low as 488 in 2011, and back up in 2012 to 725. And last year it went down again to 694. So for me, I believe not only that it fits, but that it's going to fit for a while. And if it doesn't fit later on down the road, you can take special ed kids out of Newtown or Goodnoe to make room if you need that room, or make plans to build a new school on the house track. So I'm also mourning because if some future board decides to make buildings more efficient by closing schools or redistricting, Mark Klein will not be here to do it. And although Mark has many qualities that make him a valuable superintendent, he really shines when the community is going through difficult times, whether it be a faltering economy, a security-fearful public, the inappropriateness of a teacher's behavior, or tragic deaths of young students. If CR were to close or redistrict schools in order to get efficiency, Mark Klein would not only be my first choice to lead the district through the transition, but he would be the perfect choice. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Allison Weinstein, and my child goes to Newtown Elementary School. I think I'm the only one here from Newtown Elementary School. As a lovely woman from South Limestone, I agree with you about grandfathering in. It's a community, and our kids spend more time in elementary school than any other school throughout their education, and to move them when they're going into 5th and 6th grade is really disruptive. I mean, they know they have to move when they go to middle school, but my son would be one of 60 some odd kids who have to leave everything they know to be put in another school, which I know is still a very good school, but there should be something. I did like the idea about grandfathering in for 60 kids to move from the school that they know to have other kids come into their school. It's disruptive. It disrupts their learning and their social development. And if the Council Rock says they want to get their kids ready and developed, and disrupting them really doesn't do that. And we moved here because of the school system. And we moved to our neighborhood because of where our kids would go to school. And my husband, by the way, is ready to sell our house and move if the redistricting happens. So I really hope that, I know that budgeting, and we should take the emotion out of it, but they're kids and we're the parents, so it is emotional. So I would like, possibly if the redistricting happens, to consider the grandfathering of the handful of kids from each of those schools that would have to be shuffled around. Thank you.
Amy McIntyre, Newtown, on behalf of Wrightstown Elementary. I would like to applaud Mr. Grupp. I love this concept. I love kind of just identifying, this is when we redistrict. This is when we close the school. And the enrollment number was a wild guess, but if that's something that you want to do, it doesn't have to be a wild guess. You can find out what that appropriate number is and do it. And then it takes any debate away. Just like with class sizes, you've identified your guidelines, done deal. Now you know where you want to be, and that's it. So I think that's a great idea. And it'll give the community an opportunity to anticipate that happening. You can keep them updated. We're approaching our guideline for a need to redistrict, and it gives us an opportunity to know when these things might happen in the future. So I really like the idea. I hope it's something that the board thinks about taking on and, and fine-tuning the numbers, but I love the concept. What I don't like is having Wrightstown reconfigured to remove trailers to a configuration that, again, is not our district standard. It doesn't seem like the right thing to do. I would really like for this board to consider the 5th and 6th grade centers. In our superintendent's vision for our elementary schools, he said that at one time, transition was a weakness for this district, but it is now a strength. We have figured out in this district, you have figured out in this district, how to go about having students transition and do it very successfully. So we can take what you've learned and implement it in a 5th and 6th grade transition to save this district over $1 million a year. And then it would be a district standard across all of our schools. Wrightstown would not be the redheaded stepchild of the district, as someone said earlier today, and I can certainly see why they feel that way. I haven't even sent a kid there yet, and I already do too. Another option is the idea of expanding Wrightstown Elementary School to accommodate simply its current enrollment, to bring it inside. So that would not be an expansion. It would simply be bringing those kids inside a building, and we all know that can for sure be done, but we know that it's a renovation needy school. and that Schrader said you shouldn't renovate a school if 90% of the cost of renovation is what the building value is, and that is true for both Wrightstown and Richboro, which is why you might want to consider the third option, which is to build a new elementary school in the township of Wrightstown on the House track to accommodate half of Richboro. You avoid the costly renovations of both of those schools. You get your population at both Council Rock North and Council Rock South equalized, at least for the time being. And we all know that there are more classrooms in Council Rock North, so to have them at least equal, if not sending more to our north side, would make a good deal of sense. But I would like you to also keep in mind that what you decide does have a big impact on what you're going to do in your middle schools. So it sounds like you're probably going to be voting to build a new Newtown Middle School. But how big should that new Newtown Middle School be? And it really matters, you know, to build that the right size. Is it going to accommodate half of Richboro Elementary School? Is it not? Is it, you know, so yes, we do need to have a big, comprehensive, wacky plan that, you know, is hard to wrap our brains around, but you can't make these decisions in isolation, which I have said before, and I would like to make sure that the Newtown Middle School project is right-sized, which I know we all like. All right, thanks.
Melissa Williams, Wrightstown. I just wanted to reiterate Jenny Schottmiller's plan, K to 4, 5, and 6. Some people say, well, it just saves your school. No, it doesn't. It saves our district $1.4 on average $1 million a year. Also with the benefit of not closing any school. I can't seem to wrap my head around why the board hasn't gotten more excited about that. I thought that the goal of the capital planning, which I take my hats off to them because they put a lot of time in. This is not a detraction on them. Numbers shift and move, and some of them ended up different. That's nothing bad on their part. But that's a really big number for every year to save that we can put towards our middle schools or whatever else we need to do. I didn't love the idea at first till I really looked into it and thought about it more. So I think it will take some digesting for our residents, as well as our parents and our kids. But I really, really strongly feel that it should be looked at in depth because it works in other districts and it is a great savings. And it's immediate savings versus some of the capital plan committee's findings that weren't necessarily immediate. We didn't see them for 10, almost 20 years in one of the reports. That's really all I have to say is just we have to look at that in depth, in my opinion, if we're truly doing a capital planning process. It saves too much money to just say, oh, that sounds weird. Is it $1.4 million a year too weird? Because I don't think it is. That's it, I guess. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Brian Barber from Wrightstown. I'm Claire's dad. Claire goes to Wrightstown. She loves it. She's in first grade. She can't say enough good things about it. I'm here to say numbers, we've heard some people say, hey, numbers lie, and they do. They tell stories. Numbers can tell you whatever you want to say. Where I work, you can come to me and say, hey, how much do we have under management? And I can say $160 billion. Next person could be $300 billion. It could be $3 trillion. They're all true stories. They're all true numbers. But what is the data definition? So why is this that number and that's that number? Well, what is the efficient number for each school? Is each school exactly the same? Is each school different? And if we can't come up with an understanding of where we're at with what is, I mean, I'm hearing that we don't even know what a classroom is. So if we don't know what a classroom is, well, what's efficient? And so how can we close a school or add a new school if we don't know where we're at? And I'm hearing a lot of things. I heard at one point someone said, hey, you know, we could sell the Wrightstown to the school to the township. That'd be great. I heard one person say, why don't we take all the classes and have 25 students in it? And, you know, my daughter would gain 2 girls or boys or whatever. So the numbers can tell you whatever they want. If we don't have a clear definition of what the number is, then why are we looking at closing schools? Could Wrightstown expand? Maybe. Could it contract? Sure. Can redistricting happen? Sure, of course it's going to happen. I'm in Wrightstown, and I'm seeing in my development older people leaving, and I'm seeing newer, younger families come in. I have a younger daughter that's going to be going there, hopefully. And there's, neighbors that have other kids that are about her age that are going to go there. Are they going to fill in the gap from the kids that leave? Maybe, maybe not. But right now, it seems like there's, hey, we're going to close Wrightstown. We get people here. Okay, fine. Maybe that's going to happen. Maybe we can't stop that. But if we don't have a clear understanding of why that's going to happen, you're going to have people yelling, and you're going to have people having, I got a bumper sticker on my car, I got a Facebook page, If we don't have a clear understanding of why, this is going to continue to happen. I love the fact that we're looking down the road that we have to add another middle school. That's probably going to happen. I love that, you're looking down the road. But if we don't have a clear definition of a couple of things, then, hey, one piece of paper is going to tell you one thing, another piece of paper is going to tell you another thing, and, hey, numbers can lie. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay, next Thursday night, we have Facilities and Finance meeting starting at 6:30, and November 6th, we have Academic Standards at 6 o'clock, correct?
In here.
In here. And a board meeting starts at 7:30. Meeting adjourned.
Wait, there was an executive session before the meeting.
Wait, meeting's not adjourned.
Personnel and labor negotiations.
Did you get it?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, meeting adjourned.
So you don't think I'll buy meat and stuff for the rest of the day?
What's that?
It's the only way I can stay skinny.
That's right.